The following story was told before a live audience at Covenant Fellowship Church of South Holland on May 10, 2025. It was part of a 3-part storytelling event highlighting God's faithfulness in the lives of 3 people. Psalm 66, verse 16 says, "Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell what he has done for my soul." Today, you've tuned into the story of Florence Oosting. Thanks for listening.
So let's get into it. Our first storyteller, please join me in welcoming Florence Oosting up to the stage. All right, Florence, thank you for agreeing to tell just part of your story with us this evening. You bring us back in time farther than we're going to go tonight. The farthest point we're going to go to 1939. It's the year you were born.
It tells you that I'm old.
It means you have lots of stories to tell is what it means. So we go back to 1939, and you were born in the town of Onstwedde in the Netherlands. Now we're going to pause there and let our audience think about what was happening in the world in 1939 in Europe. Okay, we all on the same page about that? Yes. Right? So your early childhood and your growing up and your family's livelihood was hugely impacted by the events of World War II. In fact, the town of Onstwedde was 10 miles from the German border, is 10 miles from the German border. It's about as far as we are from Tinley Park, to put it in perspective. So Florence grew up about our distance to Tinley Park. That's how far she grew up away from the borders of Hitler's Nazi Germany, okay, to put that in perspective. So growing up in that hugely impactful time, what was it like, just to start in general, for your family at that time?
Well, first, of course, I had no idea because I was only, I was born in October, so by the time the war started, or even when there was difficulty, people were concerned about what was happening, I was not aware. So it probably was until the second year of the war that I became more aware of what was happening. But yes, for the family, my parents had lived in the city of Delft, where my father had become a police officer, and then when they had their first 2 children, two of my 2 sisters, they decided they would like to be in Groningen, which is the northernmost province in the Netherlands, and that's where their parents lived, and they wanted to be closer to their family. So that's how they ended up in Onstwedde, and that's where I was born then.
And at that time, there was kind of a choice that people had to make in terms of being in the Netherlands so close to Germany. And you can tell us a little bit about your family and your father's unique occupation and kind of the choice that your family had to make.
Yes, a lot of people in the Netherlands, like my father and mother and many, many others, were very anti-German, anti-Hitler. They're his ideas and how he treated people, especially the Jewish people. So my father was very anti that. But there were people in the Netherlands who were part of a party that was kind of halfway. You know, they were willing to kind of be accepting the fact that the Germans were there and in charge. Whereas most other Dutch people were very upset about the fact that the country that had said no, they would never get into Holland, they had lied and came in and started to be in charge.
Now, for some families, this could be an ideological thing. I don't agree with what Hitler is doing. But for your father and his unique occupation, it was something that affected him day to day. Can you tell us about what your dad did?
Yeah, he was a police officer, and when he first got to Onstwedde, and that first time, it was very easy because most of the people there went to church. It was a fairly small town and so forth, so it was like, wow, this is easy, almost too easy. But once the war started, and they found out that there were people who were what we called NSB'ers, Those were people who were members of the national group that sympathized with the Germans. And there were people like that all over, not a majority, but they were there. And that's what ended up being a problem for his police work too, because some of his bosses in the police area were also NSBers. So
that put him in some very challenging situations.
yes.
Some very specific. Can you share examples of some of those situations?
Well, he somewhere along at the first 2 years or so, I guess, of the war went pretty easily. The Germans were busy with other areas of Holland and Western Europe. So in our town, life went on fairly normally, except that at times people got angry just from what the Germans demanded of them. But by the time it got farther along, then it became dangerous for certain people who were in hiding, and that was especially people who were Jewish, and those who were against Hitler did what they could to help anybody who was in hiding and needed to be in hiding, or else they'd be sent to the concentration camps or forced to work in factories in Germany, where they often did not get fed well at all and often died even just of hunger. So, yeah.
Your father was told once, specifically, pointedly, to arrest a Jewish family.
Yes.
Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. There was a family on the same street we lived on, and they were Jewish, 4 members of the family. The oldest 3 were very elderly and very sick. They were in their 80s already. And they had a younger brother who was able to get about. And so when my dad got a phone call from his boss that he had to arrest these people and send them and bring them over to the city, where they would then be taken to some of the places where they would be killed. Sure. And so he just couldn't do that. He decided he had to say, no, I can't and I won't do that. It's wrong. So that was, difficult and dangerous to some extent. So he tried to talk to one of the doctors in town, who also was an NSBer, but he was willing to say to the boss, these people are just so sick. There's no point in taking them. But okay, no, you have to bring them. And my dad finally then said, no, I'm not going to do that. So that was dangerous, but he did it. And then the next day, he got a phone call that one of his bosses, one of the bosses who was quite willing to arrest these Jewish people, he was going to come. So, okay, he came and took those 3. My dad made sure that the younger brother knew that he had to find safety if he wasn't going to be taken, and he did survive the war. But the other 3 were taken and actually ended up dying in some camp in Germany. So that was very sad. But my dad, the boss did not, immediately go say, okay, this guy's got to be arrested because he's not following our rules. So he was very thankful that he was not arrested.
Right. Certainly your dad on the right side of history there. on the right side of morality there, obviously. You mentioned that there were Jewish people living in the town of Onstwedde and hiding.
Yes.
One of them was a Jewish rabbi who, on one occasion, needed to leave the town, and your dad had a hand in helping him do that. Can you tell us that story?
Right. He, in a street right near where we lived, the news came about that the Germans, assisted by some Dutch men, had gone into 2 houses to check on the people there, and they had come upon 2 Jewish people there. So they arrested them and the owner of that house. And then the next day, they also found out that they were back because somebody in the group must have been almost forced to talk, that another neighbor had also had these same Jews. So they were also arrested. He was also arrested. And both of those Onstwedde people never returned healthy. And of course, the people that they took, the Jewish people, were taken and died.
So the story of this rabbi that your
Yes.
dad was able to help.
Yeah, they decided my dad and the man who had the house where this rabbi was kept, they had to do something with him, and there was somebody in another town who was willing to take him. But by that time, this was about 53 or 43 or so at the time. People were not allowed, regular people were not allowed to be driving at night. By 8 o'clock, you could no longer be on the road, except for police. So my dad's solution to saving this rabbi was to get one of his extra clothing, uniforms, and put that on the rabbi. They got him a bicycle. He hadn't ridden a bicycle for a long time, so it was kind of chancy, but he made it. They got on the road, and then about 12 midnight or so they left, because as policemen, it looked like 2 policemen, and they both made it all the way to town, where they were going to be finding a better place for him. And then all of a sudden, when they crossed a river, kind of, then the rabbi fell over on his bike, and that scared my dad, because if he had all of a sudden been hurt badly,
sure.
There would have been real problems. Yeah. But he was able to get up, and just a few miles down the road, they got to the man who would take him. And my dad got back home, and my mother was very, very thankful that he returned, because, again, it was very difficult.
And isn't it true that rabbi needed glasses to see?
Yes.
However, go ahead.
Policemen weren't supposed to be able to have to use any glasses.
Right, because part of the reason they got in the service is they had good eyesight.
Yep.
So none of the policemen wore glasses.
So it was difficult for him. It was, he hadn't been riding a bike for a long time, and he just couldn't see really sometimes at all where he was going, but they made it. And there was nobody on the road that they crossed. And that's what my dad was worried about, that they would see either a German or another police group that would cause them trouble.
Yes.
So,
Everybody take a breath. He made it okay. Florence, can you please tell us about, you had a family friend who worked for a company who made ration stamps. And
yes,
there were families who were hiding these Jewish people who needed extra ration stamps in order to feed the people that they were sheltering.
That's the same man who had this rabbi at
Okay.
his house.
Okay.
Yes, and he worked for the village kind of, or the area at least, and these stamps were necessary if you wanted to go to the grocery store and buy something. You couldn't just buy it. You had to have these stamps. And that was partly because anybody who was in hiding obviously didn't get these stamps. So they stole, this man who worked there stole some of those stamps and spread them to people who were willing to help people in hiding and so forth. So my dad, that one day then he said, look, here are some extra stamps and so on. So as probably my mom and dad had done in the past, they put them inside the sides of a big chair, and then because if we kids were around at all, we wouldn't see them at all.
So like
And
beside the cushion of a large
yeah,
chair,
of a large chair,
kind of hiding them down.
hiding them down.
Okay.
And that very next day, all of a sudden there was somebody at the door, and it was the new mayor of the area. That, and he was an mayor too, also.
He was a Nazi sympathizer.
Nazi sympathizer. And whether he came because he had questions about my dad or whatever, we don't know. But yeah, he was there. And so what could you do? Invite him in. My mother got some coffee for him, and they put him into this. Our house had that front room that we kids couldn't be in, but that was for the visitors and so on. So he sat in the chair without knowing that these items were right there in the same chair. And fortunately, he never put his feet or his arms there. Yeah. And after a while, he left, and they were very glad that they didn't know. My dad always, as a police officer in the area of our town, moved around a lot. And he would stop quite often at some of the farmers where people were often hidden, because those were good places to hide, farther away from town and so forth. So he got to know a lot of these people who were in hiding, and he would take some of these, whatever they were called, to bring, so that these people who hid people in danger and would they
People
could
who were sheltering.
Yeah, we're sheltering them, keeping them in hiding, that they could use these things for getting enough food for everybody, including these people who are in hiding.
It must have been a very harrowing thing for your parents to have to even to seat him right there, knowing what was in there.
Yeah.
Florence, you've described a lot of, as we get close to wrapping up here, you've described a lot of adult problems for your parents who were adults. You as a child were 5 years old when World War II ended in 1945.
When the war was over.
When the war was over. You were 5 years old. The way you experienced it was a little bit different. One particular problem that Florence had with the war was the way the Germans treated her jump rope.
Oh.
Can you tell us about your jump rope?
That was during the war, yeah, because the Germans were still marching on the street. Yeah. I was with a girlfriend just about a few doors from our house. I was either 4 or 5, I don't know. But yeah, we went jump roping, and just the two of us. So you tie the rope to the fence, and then take turns. And we were doing that and having a good time. And then all of a sudden, at some point, we realized that down the street came a whole army of German soldiers. Wow, we were out into the house of the girl in no time, and we knelt down so that we could peek out and see what would happen when they came past. And as they got much closer, all of a sudden there was a man, an officer, a German officer, on horseback, and he pulled into the road, into the driveway, stopped where our jump rope was tied up, untied it, and took it away. And we thought, that's not right. That's not fair. Of course, in the meantime, later I learned that at that time, in much of Holland, of the Netherlands, the Germans stole almost all the food that was available to people. And many, many, many people, thousands of people, died of hunger, especially the people in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, the big cities, and so forth. So losing what we lost was pretty minor. But yeah, that was one of those incidents.
Right. We'll conclude with this. You also have a particular memory of when the war was over. There was a lot of celebration going on. There were liberators from Canada, from other countries, soldiers from all over.
Yes.
And you remember that the Canadian soldiers were particularly kind to you and your siblings in a specific way.
Yeah, well, to all kids, really, because, the Canadians ended up coming to our area, and then some of them settled in a large building for the time being, and they had a lot of cigarettes available for people who were really wanting to smoke, but they had cookies and just delicious chocolate, which we hadn't even, I'd never had. There wasn't any of that available for so long. And then we, I better think about it. I just, they had bread. We had, as a family, we had enough food. Not great food, but whatever was available, we had enough food. Many people didn't so much. And my parents would send food to family in Rotterdam, Amsterdam at various times. Quite often they found out it never got there because a lot of other people would just apparently take it. But when we had that kind of white bread with probably strawberry jam, it was delicious. We had never had that. And later, my dad would asking some of these men to come to our house and invited them. And my mother she baked a cake, and then they came, and then the one Canadian gentleman, he took a bite of her cake and just put it down and said, "I'll be right back." And you see, women, you couldn't buy sugar. Sugar was not available. So you had to have beets that you used to try to get something sweet. Well, this guy was apparently just tasted that, and that was not what he would like, and he had something much better waiting in his office or so, and soon he was back with sugar. He brought her some sugar. He brought her good coffee, and then he brought a delicious cake, a fruit cake that had been sent to him by his family from Canada. And they shared that. Oh, and again, my parents were it was delicious. They really enjoyed it.
Wasn't taken as rude in any way. They really enjoyed that he brought
That's
the
right.
better cake.
Yeah. And I thought later, what I heard, they were interested in seeing us kids we were sleeping upstairs. And they asked if they could see the kids sleeping. And you'd think, well, why? They miss their own kids. And it was just, a way of being reminded. And so, yeah. Those guys, I hope they all survived. So many, I found out later, much later, that so many Canadians had died in the Netherlands during the war. And that's pretty sad.
Well, Florence, thank you for bringing us back to that era, giving us a first-hand account of that. We are so grateful to the Lord that He was faithful to you and your family, and that you are here today, even amidst that danger that you were in, to share your story with us. Can we thank Florence for sharing her story with us this evening?
Thank you. Thank you.